In this lesson, we're going to look at how to work with text in After Effects. So to start with, we're going to need to make a new composition. Go up to Composition, New Composition. I'll just call this Text. About 5 seconds should be plenty. 1280 by 720 is a pretty good size, and we'll click OK. So let's type out some text first. And like other programs, you have the ability to click and type out a line, or you can click and drag to draw a box for your text to wrap within. So I'm actually going to do the box, and I want to create 3 lines of text. So type out the quick. All right, standard dummy text, which is good for filling up space. To change the size of your text, you can either select it all, like so, or if you just select the layer itself, you can go to your character palette and increase the size. You want to get it so it spans about 3 lines of text. All right, so we got our 3 lines of text. Now we need to look at adding animators to this. So to add an animator, we're going to first expand our text layer. Then we'll go to the Animate section, and this will allow us to choose what we want to animate. We have our general transforms, along with an extra one, which is skew. You can also do the color of either the fill or the stroke. You could change your tracking, which is the space between your letters, or your line spacing, which is the space between your lines. And then character offset and value will actually change the characters in here. And then you have a blur option as well. So we'll start with rotation first. Let's go ahead and choose rotation, and you'll see that it'll create both it'll create an animator, which is going to be comprised of a range selector and a property, or more properties if you add more properties in. So let's look at this property first, rotation. And if you scrub this value a little bit, you'll see that the letters are rotating. They're not just rotating as a whole, you can see each one is rotating on its own axis. They all have their own anchor points to work with. Let me set that back to 0. Now, the default position for these anchor points is bottom center on your letters, and that's an okay starting point, but that may not be the look that you want to go for. If you want to change where this anchor point is, or change how the grouping of the anchor point works, we can do that from the More Options section within your text. So I'm going to expand more options, and we want to focus on these first 2 properties within here. The first one is anchor point grouping. By default, it's set to character. That means each letter, number, or point of punctuation, or even spaces will have its own anchor point. You can also set it to have each word have its own anchor point instead and get less movement. Each word rotates. Or you can set it by line. That way each line has its own anchor point, or all. Below that is your anchor point alignment, and this will let you change where the actual anchor point is placed. So go ahead and switch it back to character, and try changing the values in your grouping alignment. If you lower your Y, that'll raise the anchor points up. Increasing or decreasing the X, increasing it will move it to the right, decreasing it will move it to the left. But try out different combinations, and then see how it affects how the animation looks. I'm going to go ahead and set mine to be top centered, and this will give us kind of a swinging sine look. I think it's a lot easier to work with the anchor point alignment property if you don't have any actual rotation or scale on this, which would be the only 2, or skew. Skew would also be able to be adjusted by your grouping alignment. So if you have a value in there, it gets a little bit harder to place this properly, so it's better if they're in their original state versus being partially rotated or scaled or anything like that. It's a little harder to judge where that point's going. Right, so we looked at how the rotation works, but now let's look at how to actually work with the animator of this. So one obvious way of doing this is just animating it down here in this property, and that'll move all of them in the same sort of way. That's not usually the way that these animators get worked with, however. Usually you want to have it either wipe on from the beginning or wipe on from the end, or wipe off from the beginning or end. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to set a value here, and then we're going to animate what's called a range selector to move the area being affected by the property. So I'm going to set my rotation to be -90, and that'll have it rotate off the side. And what we'll do is we'll move our range selector so that as it moves through here, it's going to wipe the effect off and put our text in the right orientation. So if you expand your range selector, you'll see 3 properties. And if you remember back from trim paths, you may recognize these properties. And they're going to work pretty similar to the same way as that they worked with trim paths. Our start is going to change the start of the area being affected by the rotation property. Our end will change the end of the area being affected by our rotation property. So if we wanted this property to wipe off starting at the beginning, what we would want to do is first enable keyframes on start. Then we can move forward in time. And then we'll increase our start until it reaches our end. And that means that there's no longer any area that's being affected by the property. You can actually see the little indicators move as you do this. That just lets you know the area that's being affected by this property. That'll give you a nice movement of the effect kind of through your letters. If you wanted to go in the opposite direction, you would just lower the N instead.